Hi everyone, I'm Ellen Hine with PolitiFact. I'm our senior audience director. Give everybody a moment to log on and get started. One second. Okay, there we go. Get Lou added in. Oh, hey Lou.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good.
Hi everyone. We'll give it a couple minutes to get some more people logged on, but just to give it a general overview. Welcome to our Instagram live chat about Trump's tariffs. I am Ellen Hine, the senior audience producer for PolitiFact. We are a nonprofit, nonpartisan, independent fact-checking newsroom based out of the Poynter Institute for Media Studies. I'm here today with Lou Jacobson, our senior correspondent, chief correspondent, I apologize, PolitiFact. Lou has a ton of experience fact-checking. He's, I like to think, our in-house economic expert. So we're going to have a really good conversation today about the tariffs that Trump has enacted over the past week and what they mean in general for the average American. Lou, is there anything you want to add or you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I've been at PolitiFact since 2009, coming up on, 16 years here. I write about everything really, as all of us do. I do have an expertise in economics that I picked up over the past few years.
Perfect. So this is a Q&A. I'm going to be asking Lou questions, but if you have any questions that about the tariffs, about PolitiFact, please throw them into the chat and we'll try and get to them. So kind of starting off with the basics, Lou, can you give us sort of a rundown of these tariffs that Trump announced over this past weekend, and what kind of goods would they affect the U.S. importing?
Yeah, so
From
the
countries?
top line, sure. So the top line is that Canada and Mexico, they were supposed to be 25% tariffs, which means a 25% additional cost taken out during the border crossing. And those were pretty much across the board. I think there may have been some discussion of maybe having some waivers on certain items, but I'm not even sure it got that far enough because after just a few hours, President Trump has some conversations with the leaders of Mexico and Canada, and he has put them off for 30 days. See if they come back after 30 days, if there are additional discussions and negotiations. Not clear. Excuse me. China was supposed to have a 10% additional tariff, and that appears, I believe, to have gone through. I think that the two countries will probably be having similar calls. The leaders will have calls and figure out if there's some room to move on that. So as far as the types of products that are going to be affected, if these go into place, Canada. Key one is crude oil. Get a lot of from the Canadian tar sands, particularly in the Midwest. Cars and car parts. There are a lot of factories, U.S.-owned, big three owners have plants in Canada. Often a single car or a single part of a car will cross the border multiple times before it gets to the point of being sold to a consumer. And in theory, at least, each of those times crossing the border would be an additional 25% increase if this were to go into place. Also, agricultural goods, grain, livestock, meat, and poultry are some of the big ones that cross the border a lot. In terms of Mexico, also cars and car parts, similar type of thing where the single car times or the parts do. Wire, certain electronics, a lot of fruits and vegetables, guacamole, from avocados, of course, with the Super Bowl coming up, is one high-profile one, and of course, beer, a lot sold in the U.S.
So a lot of things that we see in our day-to-day lives.
Definitely.
Can you talk a little bit about, why has Trump imposed these tariffs and why have they become such a big part of his economic policy? He campaigned a lot on tariffs, and he promised during his 2024 campaign to have a 60% tariff on goods from China and a 10 to 20% tariff on all non-domestic goods.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting that he talked a lot about the 60% tariff on China and the 10 to 20% tariff on every foreign country's goods being brought into the U.S. He talked about that a lot during the campaign. One of the promises we are going to be tracking him on, but there's really nothing to update yet because he hasn't done quite that exactly. He started with the Mexico-Canada. And that was not something that he had said in the campaign. So it's a little bit of a different approach than what he had said he was going to do. So Trump seems to have liked the idea of tariffs for a very long time. You can see references to this back 20 years or more. And the fact that most economists in the U.S. and the world say that they are a self-defeating policy, tariffs are, really hasn't seemed to have any impact on his thinking. He seems to fundamentally want the U.S. to look like it was in the 1890s, when federal revenue was modest and mostly supported by tariffs and not by taxes. Of course, this clashes with his stated goal during the campaign, and one which was very important to his victory, of lowering the cost of consumer goods, trying to curb inflation. Tariffs, even if the entire tariff is not absorbed by the consumer, a lot of it would be based on past economic studies. So that would seem to have a price raising impact if he actually puts the forward. Now, some have suggested that it's just it's just a negotiating tool, and that does appear to be the case right now with what he's done with Canada and Mexico. But who knows beyond 30 days? So the other ones that he talked about during the campaign, 10 to 20% on all other foreign countries' goods, maybe that's coming later. He also said he wants reciprocal tariffs, which would fight foreign tariffs with our own domestic tariffs. But he has really kind of done the opposite way to start with. He's imposed on, or said, or tried to, and said he would, on certain other foreign countries, opposed to just being a reactive type of thing.
Yeah. I do want to flag, we got a great question from one of the viewers about how do these tariffs compare to the Smoot-Hawley tariffs enacted prior to the Great Depression?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I have done a little bit of kind of refresher work on the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. I don't know on the percentages and the exact countries and so forth that they were levied on, so I can't speak directly to that question. But we have been fact-checking the question of Smoot-Hawley tariffs for a long time. We had a fact check in 2016 when, during the presidential campaign, Hillary Clinton said essentially that that the Smoot-Hawley tariffs served to worsen the Depression. We looked into it, talked to a lot of experts back in 2016, and said that she was absolutely right. So Clinton was right. And yesterday, we did a little post on X about this thread. Ron Johnson, the senator from Wisconsin, Republican, said something pretty similar. He didn't get the phrasing exactly correct, but it was pretty close. And so both Clinton and Johnson were correct that the vast majority of economists who studied this, they may disagree on exactly how much impact it had and how much blame. But the tariffs, which came after the stock market crash, so they came in 1930, not in 1929, and didn't cause the stock market crash, but there's widespread agreement among economists that the Smoot-Hawley tariffs did worsen the Great Depression.
Yeah. That was a fantastic question, and I'll remind everyone who's joining us now, if you have any questions for Lou about these tariffs and what they could possibly mean, or what happened with previous tariffs, make sure to throw them in the chat. We, again, just to refresh, we're from PolitiFact. We are a nonprofit, independent fact-checking newsroom. I'm here with Lou Jacobson, who is our chief correspondent, expert on all things economic. We are, covering this, not just from a fact-checking angle, these tariff updates, but also from as part of our Trump Promise Tracker project. We at PolitiFact have been tracking presidential promises. So we've tracked Obama's, we tracked Biden's, we tracked Trump's first term. Now we're tracking his second term, and these tariffs, he has made several promises about them. So if you're interested in following that work, make sure that you head to the link in our bio. Make sure that you're following PolitiFact here and across whatever your platforms of choice. I'll kind of, we've talked about this on like a very macro scale, but what does these actions, they've been paused for 30 days, but presumably after that 30 days ends, they would go into effect. What would that mean for average Americans? How soon would they feel those effects of those tariffs when they go in place?
Yeah, that's a good question. And no one really knows exactly because, there are ways that companies can, stockpile goods before the tariffs hit. So now they have 30 days in which they can, get the pre-tariff pricing if they think they're going to go into effect. And that would delay the real hit of the tariffs until they have to start buying actual tariffed goods at some point further down the road. So we don't really know how long. We really have no idea. There doesn't appear to be sort of rhyme or reason to the timing of these. He says 30 days. Could it be 30 days? Maybe. Could it be less? Could it be more? Absolutely. One of the things we wrote about a few weeks ago is that tariffs are one of the things that the president can do basically on their own. They don't need to pass a law through Congress, which is more difficult. Even though Trump has a GOP Senate and House, it would still be more challenging because not everybody's constituents, even if you're a Republican, if you're a farm state Republican senator or a congressperson, and your constituents are really concerned about the possibility that your exports of farm goods or of manufacturing could be hit by the reciprocal tariff, you may not vote against it. Anyway, so that's why it's harder to get through Congress. But past Congresses between the 1930s and 1970s stuck certain provision laws, basically letting the president do this on their own, and basically, agreeing in advance whatever the president does, even if that was in the 1930s or the 1970s. Trump would have the power and has sought to exercise the power to actually put these into place on his own, and he doesn't need anybody's assistance on that. Because of that, it's entirely up to him. Now, Congress could come back and try to rein him in and take away some of those powers, but they'd have to do that in a way that would be to basically override a presidential veto. I'm sure he could veto it. So it has to be a high percentage of members of Congress doing that. And if they even had any desire to right now, it doesn't seem like they have much desire to do that, on the Republican side, to take on Trump and his presidential powers.
Yeah. Going back to kind of looking in the past, and I believe we had a question about this pop up in the chat. How do these tariffs compare to the tariffs that Trump imposed in his first term, and what happened when he imposed them in the past?
Yeah, I looked at this for a recent story we published. I looked at about a dozen academic or independent studies that were done of the Trump first term tariffs, 2017 to 2021, and found that while there was some disagreement over exactly how negatively they affected the economy, most of them really did say that it either raised the cost of living for consumers or slowed economic growth, or both. Now, it doesn't mean that there were no benefits. Certain sectors who were particularly aided by these tariffs did, benefit from increased sales, increased income. They decided to build new factories. But often what was the case is that if you compare this on a sort of on balance net type of comparison, the costs for the increased prices lost, economic growth was generally larger than individual benefits for the companies. Now, that was during a period when Trump mostly went for relatively narrow tariffs. So he imposed them on steel and aluminum, on washing machines, solar panels. These are easier for consumers to get around. Not entirely easy, but somewhat easier than an across-the-board tariff. If you have an across-the-board tariff, you can't choose a different untariffed product to buy because everything has a tariff on it. And he hasn't done this yet, but he said that he would do this during the campaign. If you place a tariff on all foreign goods, then you can't get them from any country. If you were just placing it on a particular item, like a washing machine, then either you could live with your washing machine a little longer and not buy one, or you could buy one from a different country, perhaps if it was limited to a particular country. And in fact, manufacturers would often get around this. Say China was targeted, they could start producing goods in Vietnam, make them Vietnamese goods, and therefore they wouldn't have the tariff on them. All that is tougher when you have across the board, either on products or on countries. So while the impact was significant, the studies found of the first term tariff, the impact potentially, if they were really to be put into place, they haven't, it would be even bigger.
Yeah. We have a question from a reader, and it's pretty detailed, so I'll just throw it to you. So the question is there any evidence that these broad spread tariffs are caused by and can possibly pay for the deficit of the renewal for the Expiring Jobs Act and tax cut from 2017?
I suspect that is what Trump and some Republicans would like to see. I haven't looked yet at this question, whether it would be enough. I suspect that experts would say that it would not be enough to cover it, but I can't say for sure. It's a good question. And, all of this is really part of the same issue, which is how the federal government. And so taxation and tariff are two sides of the same coin. You can earn money for the federal treasury either way. It does seem like from some of Trump's rhetoric over the years that he does prefer tariffs to taxes, and people will have to start arguing that, and I'm not sure what the right answer is at this point yet.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. And just a reminder, if anyone watching has a question for Lou about these tariffs, please feel free to throw it in the chat and we'll try and get to it. So Mexico and Canada clearly came to, met with Trump, came to an agreement to pause these tariffs for 30 days. China had not made a similar agreement, and so those tariffs are going to go into effect. What could these countries do to fight these tariffs, if anything, and what would need to happen for Trump to lift them?
Well, of course, the other countries could threaten their own tariffs. So that would hurt the U.S. Consumers who are buying their products and companies if it's a question of sort of commodities. And I suspect that if these are really put forward, they would and actually go into effect, and they would. what's challenging and what makes it really unclear is that Trump has really set no metrics for his claimed purpose of these tariffs, which is a decrease in fentanyl. And even if he did, it would take time to meet them. And it's a very squishy topic anyway, because if you count the amount of that gets through, you don't hasn't gone through. So it's really very hard to make a kind of metric out of this anyway. It's not even clear that his main motivation here, even though he cited in his executive orders, he said fentanyl was the cause of the emergency, which basically allowed to impose these tariffs. He seems to want a fundamental reordering of the world economy where the U.S. makes everything, or at least where foreign companies are strongly incentivized to make their goods here in the U.S. But the economists I talk to say that's not really realistic. I mean, some crops can't be grown in the weather we have. Certain goods can't be made. Even if you raise tariffs really high, it's still not necessarily going to be competitive to build certain things here compared to the way other countries do it. So it's going to be a lot of white knuckles for foreign companies who are trying to export in the U.S. It's going to be a lot of foreign knuckles, white knuckles for the U.S. producers who are trying to export, and for consumers as they look at prices as they go shopping. A lot of uncertainty. Maybe it'll end up being nothing if he just simply wants to use tariffs as a way to threaten other countries to do things. But if some of these tariffs are really imposed, then it's hard to see how there wouldn't be at least some impact on the consumer.
Yeah. So we have another question from the comments saying, farmers received federal money as a bailout from the tariffs during Trump's first term. Were there any industries affected that weren't included in those bailouts?
I definitely know that farmers got some bailouts in the first Trump term. I don't know if there were any other sectors that got bailouts. It's conceivable, but I'm not sure. Again, this with the first term tariffs being narrower, the idea of bailing out everybody with across the board tariffs is just not really feasible. I mean, the numbers just get too high, and if you're trying to save money in the federal budget, you can't start giving entitlement for anybody who's hurt by trade policy if every trade good is getting a tariff, and if consumers' prices are going up. So, he may try to give a waiver to certain goods so that they get the tariffs taken off. I think he would probably like doing that because it would give him authority and it would sort of enable him to be choosing who gets hurt and who doesn't, and to protect certain key industries. That would be, I think, within his power to a certain extent. But it all remains to be seen. All we've seen so far is he has the intent to do tariffs, but he also has the intent to give them up in exchange for concessions. And after 30 days, we'll have to return to this question.
Yeah. Kind of a broad question that someone said in the chat is just, what are your thoughts on sort of the compounding impacts of not only these tariffs, but also we've seen orders to shutter some of the some jobs in the federal government, and we're also seeing Trump's promise for mass deportations of immigrants, who many of whom do work on farms, orchards, different parts of the economy, and just kind of how do all of these things playing together, how might they impact the economy going forward? So that is a very broad question, I realize.
No, but I see two major themes here. One is specifically on the immigration question, which you're right. If his promise of mass deportations, basically every illegal immigrant in the United States being gone, um, you know, you can argue about whether that's right or wrong, morally justified, et cetera. But the reality is these people do jobs, which are in important sectors, such as housing, construction, which, if they're not here, there may be shortages of labor. Certainly agricultural, I should mention as well. Um, Crops could die on the vine because there aren't enough people here unless provisions are made to keep certain labor available. And all of these things would dovetail with the tariffs in that both would tend to push towards increased costs, prices for the consumer. So even if you didn't have anything going on the immigration front, you have tariffs potentially raising prices significantly, but add in the compounding effect of the immigration crackdown, and you could see the cost of housing go up. You could see the cost of fruits and vegetables that are harvested go up as well. So that's one point. The other point I would say is that in a very short period of time, Trump, and a lot of this was telegraphed. We heard it all the time during the campaign that he was going to do mass deportations. He was going to do major tariffs across the board. He was going to do a major goal of federal spending and departments. He has promised a lot of pretty radical things, and he's getting his start on that. Now, can the courts be used to pare those back? Sure. But the courts don't act, immediately necessarily, and these things take time to play out. What this means is a longer period of uncertainty. One of the bedrock benefits that the U.S. has had for so long is had a pretty stable kind of backdrop for anybody who wants to do business here. You knew what the law was, and if there were going to be laws changed, then it had to move through Congress and get a lot of support. It took a long time to do that. Here, it potentially is happening very quickly, and going back and forth on whether it actually pans out, on what kind of messaging we're getting about what is even being done. It's unclear sometimes. So this adds to sort of general uncertainty for the country, people who want to do business here. If the president has the ability to slap tariffs on, and then withdraw them, almost instantaneously, then that's an argument. If you're even a foreign company who wants to build a factory here or whatever, it takes a year or more to build a factory and set everything up with your workforce. If you're going to have a situation where the president is changing policy willy-nilly, it's not going to be a very good bet for you necessarily, even if other reasons are incentivizing you to come to the U.S. and locate your business here. I think a lot of business people are going to get frustrated with a back and forth and an uncertainty, which maybe this will change, settle down. But for the first couple of weeks of presidency, it's been pretty back and forth.
Yeah. To go to that point, I think this will probably be the last question that we take. Someone in the chat noted that some countries seem to be posturing to strengthening their trade relationships with other non-U.S. countries. Could we see a real threat of U.S. isolationism to a degree due to these, changes, these kind of quick, broad changes by the Trump administration?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion in the past day about Canada, Mexico, the things that they did, quote unquote, to get the tariffs lifted, at least for 30 days. In Mexico, they said they would put 10,000 troops on the border for fentanyl purposes. Canada talked about increasing security at the border. But in both of those cases, in Mexico, the Biden administration appears to have gotten a similar commitment without having to threaten tariffs. And in the case of Canada, it basically restated what it said that it would do in December when it was still Biden in office. Trump had been elected by then. These are things that could have been done without actual tariffs, which is a pretty aggressive move if you're talking about diplomacy, particularly closest friends. In the case of Canada, particularly. Did he need to do that to get these results? It looks like a lot of the results were already there or had done in the past, and if they just asked, maybe they would do that. And it's clear that the tariffs, which are a really kind of aggressive move, improved what they got. They're kind of a balancing test about how much you want to piss off your allies by threatening them versus how much can you quietly negotiate and not have to use that stick. I think a reasonable debate question.
We are gonna wrap up because we've been talking for about 30 minutes. Thank you so much, Lou, for coming and talking with us today about these tariffs, what they mean, what could possibly happen. A lot of stuff is up in the air, and we understand that in these times where a lot of things are changing very quickly, it can feel very frantic. That's why we encourage people to follow PolitiFact, because we are dedicated to getting you the facts that we know in the moment, and updating you when we have new facts, new information. You can always follow us here on Instagram. You can follow us across social media at PolitiFact. You can head to politifact.com to read our fact checks, subscribe to our newsletters, our text messages. And if you are really supportive of the work that we're doing and you want to help keep it going, we are a nonprofit organization. We do accept donations from readers. All of that work helps fund independent, nonpartisan fact-checking that holds people empowered to account. So thank you again, and I'm going to sign us off. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.